Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Irish NFL show. It is time for the Week 14 review. Just before we get into things, want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Cassidy Travel. There's all kinds of playoff trips you can get with them, and in fact, I think I saw a tweet, or maybe it was somewhere on social media. Somebody availed of a Cassidy Travel package there and was at the one of the games at the weekend. Might have been the Seahawks Panthers one. I can't quite remember. Anyway, lots of stuff there from Cassidy Travel. So let's get into yesterday's action and see how many times you jinxed it, guys. So strangely enough, two of the quick fire ones we did ended up being games of the weekend, really. So maybe let's start with game one, one that you probably had moments of excitement and sadness, Column, with the Broncos and the Chiefs. And there was sort of a runaway lead there at the start. And then Broncos back in the game. And then ultimately the Chiefs did what the Chiefs do. And they won 34-28 in the end. Maybe I'll go to you first, actually, Brian, so Colum can collect his thoughts, although he's probably been collecting them all weekend. Brian, what was your take on that one?
A 10 of two halves, I would say, in this particular game. It started out as a lot of people felt it would be, which would be a very dominant performance from the Chiefs side. Got up 27-0 after a pick six from Russell Wilson. And me and Colin were going to touch on it, briefly last night around, don't know whether it was a complacency thing on this Chiefs sideline. We have seen this from the past. We saw it in games last year. I would even go back to the championship game against the Bengals, in which they were up by 18 points at half time, and even towards the back end of that first half, they should have been taking field goals but going for touchdowns. Going back to this one last night, 27 up, looked like the game was in the bag, and then they just seemed to really stoke the fire in a rivalry that's been there for years, and obviously they've beaten them the last 13 times, but the Broncos just, something clicked for the Broncos last night, and I asked Colin what it was, and he says nobody likes getting the rip taken out of them on the opposition sideline. But the more concerning for me with the Chiefs, taking away the fact that they were complacent, was the second half performance. And you can put it down to complacency, you can put it down to poor play, because we've seen this with this Chiefs team. They rally into big leads. And the second half, so they started, like, for example, touchdown in the first half, interception before half time. Second half, first drive, 3 plays punt. Second drive, 3 plays punt. 1 touchdown, then an interception. It wasn't convincing. And in the end, they got over the line. And in fairness to the Broncos, they played really well. Russell Wilson played really well. He had 57 yards rushing. We spoke on the show a number of times how we see that kind of position of strength that he had with the Seahawks, how he was active in the run game as much as he's a quarterback had been taken away this year. But he was quite active yesterday. He threw for 3 touchdowns. And in fairness to the Broncos, they had opportunity to get over the line and get the game won. But the Chiefs' defense held on. But it wasn't the most inspiring performances from the Chiefs team. And even at 27-0 up, I thought it was more down to the fact they were playing against a team which season essentially is over. But they rallied, they got the win, and I think there's questions to be answered with the Chiefs team with bigger games to come, especially going into the playoffs. But for the Broncos, it was finally a glimmer of light that there is good players there, and Russell Wilson can lead this team. It wasn't a victory, but it was much better than what we've seen throughout the course of the season.
Although great teams find a way to win, don't they? Colum, was there a glimmer of light, like Brian said, or do you think it was something else?
I think it'll be interesting to see what happens over the rest of the season, Calla. I had said to Brian, and I think, and Brian has spoken a little bit about it there is complacency and an arrogance about the Chiefs, and I think that sparked, I wonder, was some of the stuff shown on the big screen in the stadium, Travis Kelce enjoying himself on the bench, and nobody likes to be embarrassed. And I think if the Chiefs had just gone about their business, they probably could have been resting starters come the second half, but they antagonized the Broncos and they got a response. The issue, I suppose, is that for Broncos fans, and look, there were a lot of positive moments. The stadium was rocking at times yesterday, but ultimately fall short. And we've seen this before. Last year, the Broncos almost beat the Chiefs, only for Melvin Gordon to fumble. There's a 4-point loss. Go back to 2020, and there's a 6-point loss. Go back to 2018, and there's a touchdown loss. Actually, both games in 2018 were within a score. So this has been time and time again. I'm probably going all the way back. I was actually at the Broncos game against the Chiefs in 2016. Broncos were ahead, much vaunted defense, ended up losing that game in overtime, and almost that was the domino that kind of began the past 6 years. So for the Broncos, it is how they play out the rest of the season, and we'll see, especially in terms of Russell Wilson's injuries. For the Chiefs, the concern would be echoing what Brian has said, that kind of complacency, that arrogance can creep into their game. And once you slip, it's very, very difficult to get it back. The Bengals, showed them that last year in the playoffs. The Broncos just weren't good enough to take advantage of it. But if they meet another team later in the year or in the playoffs, they need to ensure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, we shall see, I suppose. All right, well, let's move on to game 2. Cowboys and Texans. This one was super close as well, and kind of last minute heroics to do it. What's your take on it, Brian? Was there complacency going on here as well, or was it, I don't know, everyone got G'd up for another reason, or was it a tactical masterclass? What do you reckon?
Oh, it had to be complacency. I mean, we've seen this from the Cowboys. When I was watching this game last night, watching a combination of a lot of games, but this game kind of reminded me of, and Colin would notice from Wales, when the Broncos went into Dallas last year, and everybody was writing them off before that game, and the Texans came so close yesterday, and there's a conversation coming out from the beat writers in Dallas today that throughout the course of the week, once they were watching all the footage of the previous game, which the Texans were playing against the Browns, and they were trying to keep these players locked in and tuned into the game ahead of them, there was a very laid-back attitude by a number of the Cowboys players, essentially thinking this game's a given on Sunday. And we've seen in the NFL, you go down that road, and we just spoke about there, everyone Chiefs and complacency in the second half or towards the back end of the first half yesterday. Cowboys yesterday didn't play well. In fact, you look at the Cowboys game last week, and Mark referred to last Monday, they scored 33 unanswered points in the fourth quarter against the Colts, but they didn't play well for 3 quarters. They didn't play well for 4 quarters yesterday, and Dak Prescott in particular had a poor game. A lot of incomplete passes, some needless throws, needless interception at the end of the game, in which, unfortunately for the Texans, and it looked like, for everybody else watching the game, it looked like it was the Texans were going to go in for another touchdown and take a 10-point lead with less than 2 minutes to go, and that would have been the game. But okay, fair enough, the Cowboys rallied and they had a 95-yard drive to win the game. What I've noticed recently with the Cowboys defense, it's been really strong this season, and we spoke highly, and we give them their kudos and their credit when they deserve. They played against 3 quarterbacks this year. They've been quite mobile, and I was surprised to see Driscoll being so mobile as he was yesterday, but they really struggled to deal with him yesterday. They struggled to deal with Justin Fields of the Bears when he went in there, and they struggled with Jalen Hurts when they played in Philly. That to me could be the nemesis for them coming further down the line. They're going to play against Hurts again. They'll probably play against other quarterbacks in the playoffs. That would be a concern for me. And the win has come with some losses. Their secondary is banged up now. They're going to go to Jacksonville on Sunday, and their right tackle, Steele, his offensive tackle, he's out for the season now. That's been confirmed today, which is a huge loss because the offensive line over the past number of years has been solidified, and it's always been one of the great strengths of that team. The Texans, I felt sorry for them genuinely. Like, there was a few people engagement on our social asking, would this be a bigger shock, this game or certain other games? This to me would have been probably one of the biggest shocks, if not the biggest shock of the season. But they managed to win and got over the line. And the Texans again have a good coach there in Lovie Smith, but unfortunately he doesn't have a lot to play with, and he'll probably end up losing his job at some stage. But it's unfortunate because we have seen at times this season, there is games and there is hope for this team, and obviously they're going to have a lot of good picks come the draft. But the Cowboys are over the line. It was a good game, and I felt sorry for the Texans in the end.
Fair enough. Biggest shock of the season, says Brian. What do you reckon, Colin?
It would have been in ways, though we did talk about it, Calla, in the preview show, that it was all about the Cowboys showing up. And we talked about the fact that this is a recurrent problem that doesn't just go back a couple of years, it goes back decades. I mean, this goes back to, Wade Phillips and Jerry Jones infamously putting the tickets into the players' lockers before the game. It is a Jerry Jones type issue, and it is one of those situations where billionaires tend to get whatever they want, but in a league of certainly 20 other billionaires, you don't always get what you want, and this is the issue. Cowboys are extremely talented, we know that, but going up against a Texans team, and the local kind of rivalry aspect probably played a part, but the Texans were mixing up their QBs yesterday, and Jeff Driscoll is a journeyman who I have seen play in the flesh, paid cold hard cash to do that. He's also a guy who just not that long ago tried to transition to being a tight end and then went back to being a quarterback. So look, for the Cowboys, I think the potential banana skin is what you always kind of worry about with the Cowboys. But ultimately, I think Cowboys teams of years past probably would have lost that game. I think it's a good sign that they won it. But as Brian has said, it came at a significant cost in terms of injuries.
Fair enough. Cowboys, Ted. Cowboys. All right. So for the next one, I want to note that, Brian, you promised me an Axel Foley Detroit Lions jacket on the last show, because that was my memory of the Detroit Lions. And, might just go get some measurements done there during the week, Brian, because the Lions looked pretty good yesterday. And in fact, could they even make the playoffs the way they're playing? They beat the Minnesota Vikings 34-23. So talk to me about that, and tell me where you're going to pick up my jacket from as well.
It's going to be ordered in the morning if they keep going.
Perfect. Yeah, great.
Look, they've won 6 of their last 7. They lost against the number 1 seed, and that one defeat was against the number 1 seed of the AFC to a field goal. And we talked about Dan Campbell at the start of the season. We had an opportunity to speak to one of their special teams players, me and Colin, during the off-season, who has a great Irish family background, and he was talking about the great things in which Dan Campbell was doing, and we saw in the Hard Knocks during August, the show that all the players seem to be re-energised and behind them. And for parts of the season, we were saying, it's the Hard Knock story with this Lions team. They were losing games by 1 scores. But this season, in terms of the offense, it's off the charts. I mean, Jared Goff has to be the complete comeback player of the year. We did a pre-season show. We're talking about comeback players of the year, not necessarily because he was out last year, but there's so much kind of ill feeling about him since he was traded from the Rams to the Lions, and obviously the match with Stafford going to them. But yesterday again, what's happened over the course of the last few weeks as well is their defense has really started to play well. And that was the thing at the start of the season. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about all the stats. They were 34th against the run, 32nd total defense, 29th in passing defense. The last couple of weeks, ever since that Green Bay game, it's completely rebounded. And the one thing that the Vikings have been really efficient this year, despite the numerous big plays they get from Justin Jefferson, arguably the best wide receiver in the league, is when they get in the red zone, they're very efficient. They always score touchdowns. Well, they were 2 for 4 yesterday in the red zone. They were held down. The field goals. Dalvin Cook fumbled in the red zone, which is not really the type of play we've seen from this team this year, coached by Kevin O'Connell. They seem to be error-free at times. That was a big changing point. And smart plays by the Lions. And there was a few off-kilter plays. They had a special teams punt, which was a fake punt. They got a force down off. That kind of changed the momentum, swing of the game, and it looked like the Vikings were getting stranglehold. And you look at the fourth quarter, like they held the Vikings down to 15 plays, only 5 first downs. They had 29 plays, 9 first downs. They took 13 points and essentially put the game away. And right now they're averaging 27 points a game on offense. They're scoring more than that, but that's the average. Defense is holding teams down. They're on a great run, and they've got some very winnable games ahead of them. So they're 1.5 games back in the playoff push for the wild card. But the way they're playing, and you look at the teams ahead of them, such as the Giants and the Seahawks, who are going through a bit of a difficult period. There's a losing game. I can't see any reason why the Lions can't catch up. They've got a big game this weekend against the Jets, and that'll be a very interesting one to see how that goes. Because what we did say earlier in the season, when they were playing really well and efficient at home indoor, but when they were playing away in difficult places like New England, they were finding those games tough and they were losing. But the way they're going at the moment, I would imagine they'll be very confident going into New York, despite the adverse weather that's due for this game on Sunday.
Yeah, as the soundtrack of Beverly Hills Cop says, the heat is on. All right, Colm, what's your takeaway on it? Did you pick the Vikings for this one in our yeah, you did. Okay, so what do you think? What do you think went wrong?
The sheer look to me this if we talk I suppose a lot or certainly I do about the NFL being a cross between Demolition Derby and chess, and yesterday in the chess match between the Lions OC and the Vikings DC, Ed Dontel had his pants pulled down every which way. It was like and I know Sam Mons had actually discussed this earlier. It was like the Lions knew what the Vikings were going to do. They were one play ahead of them every single time. I remember growing up, my mother used to tell me the story of Idle Jack, and Idle Jack would get the wrong thing, and then he'd be told, "No, you're supposed to do it this way," and he never got the part of putting it together. He was always one step behind, and that was the Vikings' defense yesterday. It just could not keep pace. Yeah, Brian rightly talks about Justin Jefferson, and he probably should have had another touchdown yesterday, but the Lions were deserving victories. We got to see Jared Goff with some fantastic deep balls, and the Lions can come at you from kind of every which way. All of a sudden, their number 2 overall pick is really coming to life, and Brian is right; they will be a problem for everybody, I think, and it will be interesting to see. It would be a great story if they were to make it. For the Vikings, again, it's a case of dusting themselves down and picking themselves back up and trying to ensure, look, they are still at a healthy lead in that division. They still should absolutely make the playoffs, but they need to figure out the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, I look forward to my Detroit Lions jacket, Brian. We'll keep an eye on that one. Okay, before we just go into the next one, just a reminder to folks to throw out your comments and all the rest of it to us. We're very happy to read them out as we go. So listen, we're going into game 4 here. This was well, in fairness, it was a bit of an annihilation, wasn't it? It was the 49ers taking the books apart, and I'm not terribly sad for Tom Brady, but I'm sure Tom Brady was sad for Tom Brady. But let's talk about this. It was a 35-7 win, and perhaps this time, Colm, let's get your take on it first as well. I know you're a huge Tom Brady fan.
A huge fan of seeing what happened to Tom happen. Look, this is the human side of Tom Brady. He spent more than 2 decades being a cyborg. It was like watching Terminator 2 on the NFL field. Everything went right, but I had talked about it last year in the game against the Saints. I keep going back to it. It was the first time I saw a hint of him being human. The ball did not go where he wanted to do, and he looked at his hand as if like,
what are you doing to me?
How can this be happening? This doesn't happen to me. But Father Time waits for no man. And look, Tom Brady is not the biggest issue with the Bucs. He's still a very serviceable QB, but he isn't able to elevate them in the way he once could. There are all sorts of problems on the coaching staff and everything that is going wrong there with Bruce Arians moving on. But to me, this further strengthens my case about like winning with Jimmy Garoppolo, because Brock Purdy came in yesterday. He made his first ever start, and it was seamless. It was absolutely seamless. Kyle Shanahan and what Kyle Shanahan is doing. And remember now, Kyle Shanahan has lost assistants over the past couple of years. Robert Saleh went to the Jets. Mike McDaniel went to the Dolphins. He's probably going to lose to Mick O'Ryan's in the off season, because they're doing so. Like, that defense is just incredible. It's absolutely ferocious. But they lost Debo yesterday. They still find ways to do it. This 49ers team, are the team probably that the Eagles will most fear, though I think that would be quite a battle to watch. But everybody in the NFC will not fancy it. And certainly if they were to make a Super Bowl, you would look at that. I mean, if they stay fit, and depending, it sounds like Debo's injury isn't, but they will cause, even with Brock Purdy there, they will be a problem for everybody.
Yeah, no question. It helps when you have Christian McCaffrey, my former Panthers favorite. But Niners looking good. Brian, what was your takeaway from that annihilation of the Bucs?
I got a text from a Niners fan this morning. I woke up to a text saying, "Let's Brock and roll," he said. So he's obviously enjoying the Brock Purdy magic. What was even more impressive, and I know it's only one play, it was the first play of the game. He got completely clobbered on a late hit by the Bucs. It was called for a penalty, but he just got up. It didn't faze him. He got on with it. I think he's very fortunate. He's got great players there around him. He touched on McCaffrey. Obviously, Debo Samuel went off injured yesterday. Two of the touchdowns yesterday, 38-yard touchdown, 27-yard touchdown. It's not just like he's playing game management. Like, they are explosive. In this day and age, they're explosive NFL touchdowns. And he's got players that when they get their hands on the ball, they can do what we call the yak yards after catch. And he's got players like McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, if he comes back for the playoffs, Kittle. So he is quite fortunate. He's got some really talented players around him, which is why the whole Jimmy G experience was supposed to work, because he just gives it to those guys and they do all the magic. I mean, maybe it'll be Purdy that's the one who's doing that throughout the course of the season and late into the playoffs. There was a kind of a report the weekend that Jimmy Garoppolo could be back for the playoffs. But if they continue to win with him at quarterback, I don't see why they would change it. As for the Bucs, look, Colm's right. This Bucs defense, it's always going to be on the Brady situation, or whether he should have retired, his personal situation outside of football at the moment, whether he'll play again next year. With the likelihood now, it's suggesting he will play again next year. And there's been even reports he may end up with the Jets, bizarrely enough, today, which is a real kind of threw me a little bit. But this defense has been good and bad this season. They can't seem to stop the run. They were really exposed yesterday. McCaffrey did a good number on them. We saw it when they played the Panthers away. You just see when they go on the road in particular games, they can't seem to handle teams with a really reasonably good run game. And the 49ers are one of the better teams in the league. And even look at the Bucs. Sorry, just like their explosive play yesterday. They only had two explosive plays yesterday, one for 32 yards, one for 20. They were about in the second half when the 49ers were easing off. They couldn't get anything going whatsoever. And I expected the Niners to win. We all picked them in this particular game. Just didn't expect it to be the nature of how comprehensive it was, which is a great sign for the 49ers team going in the right direction.
Yeah, big time. Also, I love stats. I think I texted this to you guys earlier in the week. I saw somewhere that there's 100 plus NFL players who were born at the year after Tom Brady was drafted. So that's a fair sign of how old he is. All right, Brian, will we go to a few comments if we have a couple of them there?
We will. I believe Colm is back in a minute, so let's jump into some comments.
Yeah, Colm's just dropped off for a minute. He'll be back with us.
Rightio, yeah, the Lions are getting a bit of love as usual. The Lions seem to be very popular these days.
Yes.
Nick Kelly, the Lions could make it happen. I'd like to make it happen. I'm assuming then by that he isn't a Lions fan. He's just falling in love.
No, he's just happy for the Lions.
Yeah. Interesting one tonight, which we haven't really touched on in the Cowboys game, was that they've signed T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton was at the Colts last year. He's had a really good career there, and he wasn't picked up in free agency. The Cowboys are anxious to get another wide receiver in. They were talking about Odell Beckham last week. But T.Y. Hilton is a good player. That's a good pickup. I can get the love. And then he made a similar point around the fact that, as Colm alluded to, Cowboys win a game that was a difficult game. They found a way to win. Bit of a conversation around the MVP, which we'll probably come to shortly because we're going to get into other games. And there's a bit of Chargers-Dolphins talk, which I think we'll hold off. We'll hold off.
Yeah, we'll get into that one next. Yeah, we'll get into that one next. Yeah. In fact, will we jump into it? And I can go to you first, and Colm hopefully will be back to us by the time you've given us your thoughts. So this was Sunday Night Football, Dolphins Chargers, and I think you all picked the Dolphins, if I'm not mistaken. And then in the end, we had a scoreline that perhaps surprised you a little bit. But let's talk about the specifics of the game. The scoreline was 23-17 in the end. What was your takeaway from it, Brian?
Well, in the lead-up to the game last night, it was an NBC Sunday Night Football game, and the NBC guys were making their selections, and all 8 picked the Dolphins. So then I said, "Oh well, we're all jinxed.
We're done now." Yeah.
We really are done. Really are done. Look, there's as everybody knows in the NFL world, it's Herbert Tua. It's the two guys that were picked in the draft a couple of years ago, 4th pick and 5th pick, and they came up against each other last night. The Chargers defense is up and down the season, and like Colin and myself continuously praised and spoke about how highly we look at Justin Herbert as arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And he's been trying to win games with little around him at times. And last night I felt it was evident. I know Collins has his ups and downs on whether Mike Williams is a standout number one wide receiver, but when he plays, they are a bit more dynamic, and we saw that last night. It allows Keenan Allen to be a bit more freeful and get into positions to, take care of third down throws when they're in the 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, and we saw a lot of them last night. And for the Dolphins, like the last 2 games, Tua has been pressured, and when he's pressured, he feels he's not comfortable. The throws are a little bit off. People go on about him being the most accurate thrower in the league, but when he's given all the time in the world to throw it, yes. But last night and again last week, he's been off. Some of the plays on the sideline when he was going out the perimeter were going out of bounds. Didn't look comfortable. Thought the Dolphins got away from a game plan, which is what every team has been using this season, which is to run the ball in this Chargers defense, because when you run on them, they can't stop it. They only carried the ball 19 times last night, which was very low numbers in the NFL world, which is surprising. They continuously went for throws, and it just didn't materialise for them. And as the game went on, they kind of tired out this Dolphins defense, and the Dolphins right now are on a bit of a slippery slope. There's a few comments in there from Dolphins fans around what they think of Tua and whether they think this team is going to rebound and put themselves in the playoffs. I imagine they will, but it's a bit concerning. Even again, the other stats in the game, they punted 7 times. They were 3-11 on 3rd downs. Like, it's not what we've been seeing from this season. I would put it down to a very decent, as much as I give out with the Chargers and their head coach, I thought defensively last night was a lot better than what we've seen. And it allowed them with more players back on offense to find a way to win a game and put themselves back in the shake-up for the playoffs.
Yeah. And what about you, Colm? Do you think like it was a wobble from the Dolphins, or was this just brilliant Chargers play, or was it a little bit of both, or where do you see it?
I think this is a bit, the NFL is a league, right, where something emerges, a trend emerges, or a new tactic emerges, essentially, and then there's a response to it. And for the Dolphins, they came out, right, and they had Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle and a whole host of other weapons. But Benjamin Solak does fantastic breakdowns. He's with The Ringer. If you're not following him, follow him. He does really, really great breakdowns. And he highlighted what Brandon Staley did with this Chargers defense. While certainly you can criticize him for some things, a bit like Vic Fangio, maybe he has found the kryptonite of one of the great offenses. And what they looked to do was essentially force Waddle and Hill to the outside constantly, and not allow Tua the intermediate middle of the field. That's where Tua throws the most. They don't believe Tua has the arm to go deep consistently, especially on the outside, and that's what you saw them do time and time again. And they used the safety, who they call the robber, to just drop in to that intermediate in the middle and basically say, no, not going to be there. And it was really interesting to watch that. So it will be, how does McDaniel respond to that? How does Tua respond to that? Because up to now, it has been, they haven't had to think about it, right? Tyreek Hill and Waddle are so quick, and what they were doing was working so well that essentially the play started. All Tua had to do was put the ball where it was he had been told almost, or he knew it was to go, and the players are going to be there. All of a sudden, they're not going to be there. They've taken that away. What will the response be to that? The good news, if you are a Dolphins fan, is that it sounds like the injury to Hill's ankle is nothing too serious, and Armstead didn't have a setback in the game, so he should be good to go against the Bills. But if you like stats, Kala, I saw a stat earlier that said that this one loss had dropped the Dolphins' chances to get to the playoffs by 14%. So it will be a very, very interesting end to the season. As Alex Ferguson used to call it, squeaky bum time.
Squeaky bum time, indeed. Yes. Brian, did you want to come back in there? I just saw you thinking something through there.
Yeah, so you have a few I left behind. I actually, Colin nailed it. He was talking about some of the particular players. Like there was a few scenarios last night where Tyreek Hill was turning around, where he was trying to get himself free, and the ball was already in a position where, essentially, as you said, Tua was thrown exactly where he expected it to be. There was no kind of, he wasn't like he was doing an audible or reversing a play. It was like that's where it was supposed to be, and Tyreek Hill was kind of looking around. There was a bit of a mismatch at time, which we're not used to seeing. And there were some questionable decisions, and I don't think it would have impacted on the result, but there was, and it's been called out in some of the comments this evening. There was a roughing the passer flag on the Dolphins, which was ridiculous. Like we've seen some of it earlier in the season where there are fair challenges in terms of looking to sack the quarterback. And again, we saw it creeping back in to the game last night. And I would say the NFL haven't done the league haven't done the Dolphins any favours. They play Sunday night in LA, the latest game on the Sunday slate. And now there's 3 games this Saturday, and they're in the Saturday slate, going into Buffalo, top of the division, number 1 seed, in a game that's a must-win, and they're not getting a lot of time to turn it all around, having them to travel back from West Coast to East Coast and back up then to New York, to the wider New York area. So I don't think there's done many favours on that side of things. I thought that was a bit unfair, bearing in mind that they actually flexed that game into Sunday Night Football in the first place. It wasn't like it was locked in for that time. Took the Broncos out, put that one in, and then still moved them to a Saturday game the following week, which I thought was a bit unfair. So that's going to be a really difficult game this weekend, and be interesting to see how it plays out.
They're professional athletes. They'll manage with all their money and all their training. They'll be okay, I'm sure. All right. So the next one's an exciting one for me. 13 is usually an unlucky number, but 13 months ago was the last time the Panthers won on the road. And they beat the Seahawks yesterday. I didn't even see it because I sort of was like, well, that's not happening. What kind of a fan am I? But they won 30-24. And actually, from what I understand, that score is maybe not even as reflective of how one-sided it was. Brian, tell me, you saw this, and what did you take from it?
This was, I genuinely, it was 30-24. It was a late score by the Seahawks with 12 seconds to go. This was probably one of the most dominant performances that we saw. I said to Colin last night, I had a feeling for the Panthers all week. I thought their run game has been, having watched the Seahawks the last few weeks, I haven't seen them live in Munich. Like the Bucks ran the ball down their throat in Munich, and it's starting to slow down a bit, this defense, which was playing really well at the start of the season. And the Panthers have 3 running backs. Since they've traded McCaffrey, they've gone with a running back by committee: Foreman, Hubbard, Blackspear, who's come in as a rookie. He's been done really well. They had 10 drives yesterday. They only punted twice. And even on the last drive, where they needed to get first downs to win the game, they essentially ran the ball for 67 yards, got 3 first downs, kicked the game-winning field goal to essentially put the game away. It was very dominant. Seattle never got going. And it could have been more comfortable. The Panthers were in the red zone later in the game, and instead of taking the field goal, they went for it on 4th down. They actually ran 4 throwing plays, which was quite surprising. Bearing in mind how successful they were on the run game throughout the course of the game. All 3 running backs were in the game, and the Panthers defense, which in fairness to Colin has been something Colin consistently has spoke about, how well they played despite the difficulty this season, again had a really solid game. And like, bearing in mind that they sacked Matt Rule and Wilkes came in, and he had a difficult time when he was head coach in the league previously, and the owner said there's no chance of him getting the job. The way things are going, you'd have to, even in his press conference after the game, he was saying, when we were trading players and when the GMs were trading players and trying to offset some players for next season and trying to reduce salary cap, people thought we were tanking. Well, the players internally rallied. And Sam Darnold, the quarterback, and I said it the other day, he hasn't had the greatest of careers, but the one thing you can talk about, a quarterback that comes in playing his first game of the season, so late in the season, there's a freshness to him as opposed to other quarterbacks in the league, and you can see that in the way he's playing. It's like the start of the season for him. It'll probably catch up with him in the end, but right now they are playing very well. They're only 1 game out of top of the division because of how poor the Bucks are playing. They're playing against the Steelers team the weekend. That's a very winnable game at home. Who knows? Maybe they'll be the team.
Who knows? You
never know. And win.
Magic Seattle, happens sometimes.
For Seattle, again, things seem to be slowing up. They've got a difficult game against the 49ers. And I was wondering, similar to the Giants, is the success of the earlier part of the season starting to catch up because they're starting to play more difficult games and they don't have the players to compete against the higher echelons within the league.
Yeah, fair enough. Colm, how brilliant was it the Panthers winning there? Your thoughts, please.
Seriously impressive, and Brian has touched on some of it, but just to highlight, the Panthers are on their third starting QB. The QB who started the season was released, and granted, he ended up winning a game for his new team on Thursday. But at the same time, so the Panthers have gone through it. They basically sacked the entirety of the coaching staff, and they traded Christian McCaffrey. So for them to be where they are, Brian rightly points to the head coach, and I think. The concern would be that, look, the allure of a big name, with an owner who is a hedge fund guy, that may be the route he wants to go. But you would have to give serious kudos to what the head coach has done, the way in which he has rallied that team, and the fact that he has, put game plans together to get the most out of them and to exploit the weaknesses of their opponents. The NFC South is it'd be great. It'd be a great story to see somebody else win it rather than Tom Brady. And I think the vast majority of people around the league would enjoy that if it was to be the Panthers. What an unbelievable story that would be. The refrain that you hear constantly around the league is, oh, you shouldn't make a coaching change mid-season because it doesn't benefit you, and it doesn't make, you might get a 1 or 2 game bounce. Well, the Panthers have proven all that wrong at the moment. That division, while the Bucs are definitely favorites, it is up for grabs, and it would be a wonderful story if it was to be the Panthers.
Oh, yeah. Well, for me, that would be a double happy story, all right. Tom Brady sunk and the Panthers rising back up to the top where they belong. All right. Game 7 that we're going to talk about now is the, it's the Jags and the Titans. It was an interesting game. 36-22 was the final score. What was your take? Actually, Colm, let's go to you first on what you think was the formula for success here.
I think what was really impressive was, that this is the Titans team that has a significant number of injuries, and that can't be ignored in some ways. But it is a Titans team who started the game really well, and Derrick Henry, he absolutely adores playing the Texans. The Texans are who he would love to play every single week. But the next team on the list would be the Jags. And he started off yesterday, and it was certainly the case that he was trundling all over everybody. But again, this is a case, I think, of a number of different factors, but you cannot overlook the head coach and the culture that he has instilled there, and the fact that they hadn't won in Tennessee in so long, but the fear isn't there. And Trevor Lawrence, who during the week, had missed out. There were questions. He was limited, all that sort of stuff. He was fantastic yesterday. He was really, really great. And you've heard the players consistently, and we referenced it on the show just last week, I think. Again, they talked about how they felt that Trevor Lawrence didn't have a rookie year because things were, just so crazy under Urban Meyer, that he really missed out. And that's why maybe earlier this year, he didn't look like maybe the second year QB that we expected, that he was still learning, and that he has grown massively. This is another division you would expect the Titans to probably close it out, but the Jags will look at it. They will look at the fact that the Titans are so beaten up, and they will say, we meet again in week 18. If we can win out, maybe they could be in with the shot of a playoff berth, and that is the beauty of the NFL. Like last year, there wasn't a bigger. Pick your analogy: dumpster fire, train wreck, clown show, whatever you want to pick. The Jags were it. The Jags made the Texans look like the sane and sensible group, and yet here we are, a year on, a new head coach, and all of a sudden Trevor Lawrence is beginning to look, like the quarterback we thought he could become.
Yeah, and more power to him. Okay, Brian, your take on the same game?
I think Colin summed it up very well, and I think this conversation with the fact that the division is still open, they're 2 games behind. I think this weekend is significant. Titans have lost 3 games in a row now. They're going into LA to play the Chargers, as we spoke about there, who've just won that game against Miami. And the Jags have the Cowboys at home. So if the Jags are for real and they are going to run the table, no bigger win than to go and beat a Cowboys side. Look, I look at Trevor Lawrence's numbers over the past few weeks. They're really off the charts. Even the game last week in Detroit, he had some good numbers despite the injury. And he was 30 of 42 yesterday, 368, 3 touchdowns. They're really staggering numbers. Bearing in mind that in the first half, it took a while for their offense to get going. Columns rightly called it. Derrick Henry was playing really well. He had a touchdown. He was running all over him. And then something seemed to click with this Jags defense. They found ways to hold him down. There was a number of fumbles. And in the second half, they were totally dominant. They totally dominated the game. They put it away. It was like there was a late score from the Titans to essentially even make it a bit more respectable than it actually was. And even at the end of the season, if they don't run the table and they don't get into the playoffs and win this division, they reflect on a season which was a lot of what ifs. They lost against the Texans by 1 score. They lost against the Colts by 1 score with a touchdown with 10 seconds to go. Had the game against the Giants to win. Had against the Broncos to win in London. Like I know there'll be a lot of teams that will feel the same. They look at every game and scrutinise and say, "Oh, if only we had done this." But there's 4 games there this season. They really could have, if they had split that 2-2, they would be joined top now, and essentially top of the division. So there's a lot of momentum still with them. They still got an great opportunity. It's a fantastic win. You called it out the other day on the show. They lost the last 5 games in that stadium, so they've broken the slide there. And Trevor Lawrence is starting to look like the quarterback that we all expected, albeit it's taken a season and a half into his NFL career to finally get to the stage that we were hoping and expect to see when he came out of Clemson.
Yeah, good things take time. All right, we have one more game before we get into the quick fire round. So this one was in pretty poor weather conditions, and the Bills defeated the Jets 20 points to 12, I think it was. And I know the Jets QB got injured there. Now, the weather wasn't quite as bad, or it was worse probably than it was in Ireland. I nearly said it wasn't as bad as it was here in Ireland when we had our light dusting of snow and people lost their mind. But in any case, regardless of weather conditions, the Bills march on. So, Brian, what's your takeaway from that game?
Callie, you're talking about weather conditions. I'll give you something. I wouldn't call it a stat, it's just...
sure, let's call it a stat anyway, because I love them.
General consensus from early on in the game, it was the red zone didn't go to this game for quite some time, and the reason being there was 10 drives and there was 10 punts. Neither team could move the ball. Both defenses were on top, and it's a combination of bad weather, adverse weather conditions. But the Bills find a way, when the weather's not great, they rely on their quarterback, and we spoke about whether that can take them all the way to Arizona and win the Super Bowl. They've quite limited in their run game. They do try to maintain a run game consistently, but it just doesn't seem to work, and then they're relying on a quarterback who, again, yesterday ran for 60 yards and a touchdown. And will that get them to the Super Bowl? I'm not entirely sure, but yesterday, like the two biggest plays yesterday from a passing standpoint, 24-yard touchdown to Knox and a 32-yard to Diggs. And in fairness to the Jets defense, they are one of the better defenses in the league. They held their own the first time they played, and they beat them 2017. Colin, he selected the Jets to win this game, and there was merits to why he saw that. It just wasn't enough for them yesterday. Mike White, in fairness, yesterday, like Jets fans, and we joked about it last week with the T-shirts, but yesterday again he showed the battling quarterback. He didn't have the best of games, but he went off injured. He got evaluated, he came back on, and then got re-injured, and then ended up in hospital, and now he's probably unlikely to play this weekend. But it's kind of a testament to the guy that he kept coming in and trying to win the game and put the team on his shoulders. It wasn't to be. The Jets are now in this precarious situation, similar to other teams in the AFC that are battling for this wild card spot. They're losing games, but they'll have to break the slide this weekend potentially when they play the Lions. But The Bills march on. The weather was difficult. If any team can deal with the weather in Buffalo, it's obviously
Yeah,
the
no
home
doubt.
team, and
It's the Buffalo Bills.
which is why it's so crucial and why we keep talking about whoever ends up as the 4th seed in the AFC. If it's Buffalo, you find it very difficult to see who will go in there, especially in January when the weather only gets worse, and beat them to make it into the Super Bowl.
Although the weather is much nicer in Arizona, maybe they can handle that too. Colin, what do you take away from this Bills game?
Sorry, Calla, I think even if you're maybe not, even if you're not an NFL fan, you are probably familiar with the culture of the Buffalo Bills and the Bills Mafia and the way in which they the fandom, what they do, the tailgating, the fact that they launch themselves off of buildings, off of trailers, off of anything in the vicinity to break through tables. And their defense treated Mike White like a table at a tailgate yesterday. Every single opportunity, they absolutely floored him. And yeah, Brian is right. He showed remarkable toughness to come in there. It will be, I suppose, interesting to see what happens because obviously Zach Wilson is there. Mike White is out of contract this year. So what the Jets are going to do. Brian mentioned earlier the rumor about Tom Brady. So I imagine they know they have a seriously talented defense. They have all sorts of question marks about the quarterback, and they need to figure out something. I think Brian has really summed up the game well. For Buffalo, it is about endeavoring to get that number 1 seed. But the other thing that is everyone's talking about this week again is potential for more snow. And we saw them have to move to Detroit in the not too distant past, just a couple of weeks ago. Could that be the case again, or might we finally get a proper snow game? Which is what I think most people want. But yes, certainly keep an eye on the weather.
Yes, always. As Irishmen, we always do. Right, so we'll go to the quick fire round. Oh, Brian, did you have something there? Yeah.
No, I had a look. I was enticed by the forecast for the weekend. Snow -6 and heavy rain is what the overall forecast for this game. So,
snow and heavy rain, or just heavy rain?
Bit of combination of everything.
Little combo. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well, good luck to them. We'll probably have much the same here in Dublin. Okay, well, listen, we'll get into the quick fire round here, and we'll make it quick fire. So the first one is Eagles destroyed the Giants. I'm sorry to say, Brian, 48-22. But I'm going to ask Colm to take it because I don't think we have to subject you to that again. So Colm, am I right in thinking that's the Eagles in the playoffs now?
Yeah, first team to confirm their place, and they do so by beating their divisional rivals. I'm not sure what Brian would it be worse if it was the Cowboys or the Eagles? Probably both on the same level. But look, the Eagles set about doing. They started off, I suppose, in a similar way to the Chiefs against the Broncos, but they never got complacent, and they didn't allow the Giants to get back into it. The Giants, I mean, just about everything that could go wrong in the first half in particular did go wrong. There was that awful kind of missed punt that just I think will probably end up being a gif for the best part of the next decade or thereabouts. The Eagles, they did get to bring in the backups at the end of the game, and really for this Eagles team, it's about ensuring obviously they secure now that they have the playoff spot, securing number 1 so that all roads have to go through Philadelphia. But this is Jalen Hurts, I think, is the first QB with back-to-back seasons where he has double-digit rushing touchdowns. Miles Sanders has 1,000 yards. AJ Brown has 1,000 yards. Devontae Smith is a weapon, and Dallas Goedert has to come back as yet. They are serious business. And no, again, kind of we talked about like the way in which this league changes so quickly. For first half of last season, the Eagles were a disaster. Nick Sirianni got things sorted out, and we were joined by Bo Wolf a few weeks ago, who covers the Eagles for The Athletic. He talked about in the off season, the Eagles, much to my chagrin, looked at replacing Jalen Hurts. They looked at different options. They got very lucky that none of those options worked out, because after 14 weeks, he is, I would say, at this point, the front runner, potentially just ahead of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow, who is making a late charge in the MVP race.
Interesting. Okay, next quick fire for you then, Brian. It's the Bengals, not quite as explosive as the Eagles there, but they did get past the Browns 23-10. What was the main takeaways for you there?
Yeah, well, I was reflecting on this game as opposed to last week's game when they beat the Chiefs, and you're right, it wasn't as explosive, from Joe Burrow this week, but it was a typical divisional game, and the Browns hung around for quite a while, and even late on they had an opportunity to bring it back within score. Deshaun Watson looked a little bit better this week. He had some nice plays to the perimeter to Cooper and a few other players, but he kind of fell away towards the back end of the game, and we saw Burrow with a nice free flicker touchdown. We've seen more of these over the course of the past few weeks, in particular with the Raiders to Irwin, and essentially that was the game. And we saw Mixon come back yesterday. He was been out with concussion, and he had a reasonably good game. He had a big run, but Perrine, who's stepped in while he's been out again with another touchdown yesterday. And for the Bengals, it's nice to see them win when it's not pretty, because we saw when they went to Tennessee and it was a similar type of game. They won at 2016 that day. They won yesterday by 13 points, but for large parts of the game, it wasn't as one-sided as it may seem, as it seemed, in terms of going into the game, what people would have expected. The Browns hung around. But for the Bengals, it's another significant win. They go to the Bucs this weekend, and they're certainly a team that are floating under the radar right now in terms of, we're all talking about the Bills and Chiefs, but maybe it will be the Bengals that we see again in the Super Bowl come Arizona in February.
Nice. Okay, and then the last quick fire one, and I'll throw this one to you, Colm. So the Ravens won a close one there against the Steelers. I think, what was the final score? 16-14. So talk to me about that one, and have you got any good stats?
I do. I have a great stat, actually, courtesy of Roger Sherman, who writes with another from the Ringer, and who joined us in the Aviva when he watched his alma mater, Northwestern, get the victory over Nebraska. Roger, who actually owns the Twitter handle @Roger, and he pointed out that there have been exactly 2 games this season where a QB has subbed into a game and thrown 3 interceptions. Kenny Pickett subbing in for Mitchell Trubisky in week 4, and then Mitchell Trubisky subbing in for Kenny Pickett in week 14, which is the most perfect of all stats, I believe. So kudos to Roger for pointing that one out. And look, I suppose this is a game that highlighted a number of things, I think, for me, Calla. I haven't seen, I didn't get time to dig into it, and I don't know if anyone has dug into it. It feels like there are more injuries and more quarterback injuries potentially than ever before. Both of these teams lost their starting QBs yesterday. Obviously, Russell Wilson went out as well. It just feels like that seems to be happening a lot this year. I don't know if that's recency bias or if that is actually something. But also for young Kenny Pickett, who is obviously in his first season with the Steelers, he now has his second concussion in just a couple of months. That's a big concern, and I hope that he is given the time. And Mitch Trubisky is a problem. But I hope that still doesn't mean that they rush Kenny Pickett back. A concussion is a brain injury, and he really needs the time to heal up. And yeah, like your first season, that is the last thing you want. But it probably speaks to the way in which, look, this game is playing when you have 320-pound men who can run a 40-yard dash in just a shade over 4 seconds coming, trying to knock you to the ground. It's going to lead to some bad injuries. So look, a speedy recovery for him, that Russell Wilson, and everyone else dealing with injuries around the league get the time that they need.
Absolutely, and more of that, more healing for all of them. No need to rush them back. Perhaps before we go into the Monday night football preview, which will be happening in a couple of hours, I suppose. Brian, do we have a couple more comments we could throw up here?
Brian, you're on mute.
I think you're on mute, Brian.
No,
I thought
back.
maybe it was my Wi-Fi fell out.
No, I'm back. I'm back in action. No,
you're back.
No, I didn't call it out, and it rightly should have been called out, which was the Burrow touchdown to Chase. We spoke earlier around Tyreek Hill literally turning his head, essentially looking for the ball to be there when at a specific point. When that was this touchdown yesterday, Chase wasn't even looking at the play. Literally turned his head, and there the ball was. It was a fantastic catch. Point made by Colin several times this season. Eagles' best trenches team in the league, Bobby both offensively and defensively. Keith, one of our resident Dolphins fans, is delighted to hear what the weather is for this weekend. Going into Buffalo, which reflects probably his thoughts on how the game is going to go. I'm assuming this is a Chargers fan. We're back, baby. Or Staley's back. There we go. Staley be spoofing, yeah. And a few more comments around the Dolphins.
Maybe he's a Panthers fan.
Oh, and here's Declan. The Panthers are moving.
Yeah.
And with Sam, I see ghosts. Darren referring back to the incident a couple of years ago against the Patriots. But again, as always, some great.
Thanks for all the comments
from everyone.
Sure, I just want to jump on because I know Fred mentioned the Dan Schneider issue, and for anyone who isn't aware, Dan Schneider, owner of the Washington Commanders, one of the most repugnant owners in the league, which is saying something, given some of the others. But it emerged over the weekend, and Andrew Brandt was commenting on this. Former Packers GM, that Schneider, it would appear, is the man who leaked the Gruden emails, the racist Gruden emails, and John rightly lost his job. But ultimately, all those emails were leaked to deflect attention from the investigation into Dan Schneider, who continues to refuse to appear in front of Congress. But it would seem that the wheels are finally in motion for a potential sale of the Washington Commanders. And I imagine he will, the price that it'll fetch will be in excess of 5, if not 6 billion.
Good God! Wow. There's a lot to process there. Maybe we can cover some more of that at a future date. Thanks for bringing it up as well in the chat. It's important stuff to talk about. Okay, so let's just quickly close out here, lads, with the Monday Night Football preview. So it's Patriots, who are 6-6, up against the Cardinals, who are 4-8. Must-win game for the Patriots here to keep the old playoff hopes alive. So, Brian, what would you say about this game, and what's your pick?
Yeah, well, just in terms of playoff push for the Patriots, I was just checking today. If they are to win, they will leapfrog into the 7th spot within the playoffs. Essentially, puts them in as a playoff team. If the season was to end today, knocking the Chargers and Jets down. So, bearing in mind the Patriots have kind of gone off kilter the last few weeks with some difficult games, kind of reflective of what we said about teams who've had reasonably good starts to the season, but then come up against a tougher opposition and can't live with them. They lost to the Bills on Thursday night there recently. They've had the bones of 11 days now to get ready for this game against an Arizona team that have been struggling, and there seems to be a lot of upheaval in terms of whether the quarterback is getting on well with the coach and we've seen the Cardinals, in particular at home this season, play reasonably well. They gave the Eagles a really tough game. They nearly put that game into overtime, and play the Rams tough, and they always find well to find games at home a lot easier than on the road. And Kyler Murray seems to be a bit more comfortable at home, and they play a lot better. But I think Bill Belichick, when it comes, this is a big situation for the Patriots this season. They probably didn't expect to be in this position again. Bearing in mind how the results have gone over the past fortnight, to be in a position where if they win tonight, they're back in with a playoff spot, and essentially their future of the season is in their own hands. And Mac Jones didn't play the best games against the Bills, but the week prior to that, when they were on the road in Minnesota, I thought was his best game as a Patriot. Caught him saw firsthand, he was there. And I could see him having that type of game tonight. I think the Patriots will find a way to win this, get over the line. I think the Cards might keep it close, but I think it's one of those games that come to the fourth quarter, Bill Belichick and his experience, the Patriots find a way to get over the line and make it to 7-6 and put themselves back in the shake-up for the playoffs.
Okay, so you're calling the Patriots. Colin, what about you? What's your take on it?
I think this is another one of those coin toss games, because Brian has rightly pointed out the ways in which the Patriots could certainly win this game, all very fair. But this Cardinals team has plenty of talent. But I suppose there are a number of issues with it as well. There are question marks as to whether the GM will be there next year, although apparently he has quite a cozy relationship with ownership. Questions around the head coach. Obviously, they gave Kyler Murray a big contract, so he will be there. And I just think they have flattered to deceive at times. This year they're capable of being a really good team. And I feel that this could be one of those games where there's no real, there's no real pressure on the Cardinals, right? They're not expected to really do anything. All of a sudden, the kind of focus is all about the 49ers and the 49ers kind of dominance. The Rams, obviously, with Baker Mayfield last week. And while the Seahawks have fallen off, the Seahawks have probably performed above where most people expected. So the focus really has been taken away from the Cardinals. I'm going to say for that reason, this could be one of the games where they actually play really well. And I think the expectation for Cards fans should be, the Cards should be, given what they've invested, the fact that they are sitting on 4 wins should lead to serious pressure on the GM and the head coach. I'm going to say that the expectation should be the Cardinals should get the victory. And for that reason, I'm going to pick them. So I'm going to say the Cardinals.
Great. Well, that means we may not have jinxed it this time, because I know Mark picked the Pats. So that's 2 of you for the Patriots and 1 of you for the Cardinals. And my vote doesn't matter, so I won't even throw one in the ring. So that's great, lads. Another review done. And so that is it for tonight's show. Tonight we've had perfectly symmetrical stats. We've had discussions of the weather in Buffalo and in Ireland. And we've discussed some of the best games around. So playoff spots booked, playoff spots on the way. So join us all again on Thursday when we look ahead to week 15. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.